Alrighty guys, so I bought myself a TD42 to go into my GU Patrol and replace the ZD30. Originally this video was just going to be a reseal, so while it's out the car, strip it down, throw some new gaskets in and throw it back together and then get it back in my Patrol. Unfortunately I found a few things along the way that I'm not really too happy with, so we're going to do a full rebuild. That's just the luck with buying second-hand motors, you don't really know what you're going to get. But that's okay because we can, sort it all out and we'll know exactly what we've got when we're done with it. We'll know we've got fresh engine ready to rock and roll. So hopefully you guys will be able to follow along with this and maybe weigh up whether it's worth you doing yourself or sending it away. And if it's worth you doing it yourself, hopefully you can follow this video along and do it step by step. Do it yourself at home, save a bit of money and build yourself an engine. So now it's going to be a full tear down and then a rebuild, new rings, new bearings. The whole lot, any engine accessories that need replacing, we'll throw them in as well, and then have a brand new motor. So I'm sure you guys know what's sitting right in front of me. This is Nissan's TD42, their best ever forklift motor, and I plan on throwing this into my ZD30 Patrol. So let's tear this thing down. So I'm going to start by draining the oil because she's still full. Alright, so we've got the last of the oil draining out now. We're going to go to the intake manifold and start pulling that off. So these are a 12mm and there's 2 on each intake cylinder, so that makes 12. So that's all of our bolts out now. We'll just give it a little tap. There we go. So now we're going to take off the turbo and manifold, so I'm going to disconnect the water lines and our oil lines and then pull the manifold. So we've pulled off the water and the oil, now we're just going to pull the whole manifold off with the turbo still attached. Alright, so now all of our bolts are undone. Same thing, just give it a tap to break the seal. Oh, she is glued on there with gaskets, so we're going to need a bigger tapper. Have a look at how close she came to hitting the ground. In my defense, I've never owned an engine this heavy. It's bloody long too, so the balance is all the way out from the rear end of the stand, so I probably didn't like that very much either. The good news is that our sump is pretty accessible now. Take note of this, they are bloody heavy. Put them on a decent stand and don't rotate them quickly. If you're going to spin them, do it in a very controlled manner or suffer the consequences. Alrighty guys, so we're back again. I've got another engine stand sponsored by Roam Life. Thanks Tom for the engine stand. We got the TD back up off the floor. We actually didn't break anything. Nothing actually hit the ground, which was so lucky because it could have just smushed the whole top end. So it's really awesome that that didn't happen. I've got it chocked up this time, so I don't want to go breaking Tom's stand. So he said throw a timber under the front, and basically that just stops it from leaning so hard because there's such a long motor and we've only got it hooked on at the back. What it wants to do is pull the whole stand down. So if you throw a timber under the front, it stops that bouncing, so the engine won't do that anymore. So it should be a fairly sturdy workplace now. So we should be right to keep working on it and keep this pin in the rear so it can't do another flip. So we're going back into it. So we've got our little battery ratchet here. I'm using a 5 Allen key to undo the tab cover bolts. So from here I'm going to move to the front. I'm going to start disconnecting a couple of the belts and stuff, take off the fan and any sort of accessory pieces. So now we're going to take off our power steering pump. So we will use this adjuster here to put some slack in the belt, and we can pull the belt off and then we'll remove the pump. So two 12mm bolts on the timing cover side of the pump. And that's the adjustment bracket. And then on the bottom of the pump, we've got a 14mm, and it's a captive nut, so it means that we don't have to hold the back. That's the power steering pump off. Okay, so to get our alternator off, we've got a bolt up top to basically pin our adjustment in. So the bolt will come in from the back, and that's what will hold our alternator tight against the pull of the belt. Then we've got two bolts at the bottom that will hold the alternator onto the bracket. So you want to take this one out, you can just loosen these and then you'll push in on the alternator. You might need to give it a tap with a rubber hammer, not a steel hammer, because the housing's aluminium. Then you can slip the belt off, roll him off the front. That's your second belt off. You want to undo the bolts at the bottom. That's the alternator off. Now onto the AC. So this adjuster here, you have this bolt up on top that's a 13mm. Throw your ratchet on him, undo it, that'll push the bearing downwards. That's going to loosen off our belt tension. Grab a nice big ratchet, this is a 22mm bolt. And now, seeing as we've undone this adjustment bolt already, you can see we've got plenty of play there now. So you can start with this one or this one, it doesn't really matter, you get the same outcome. And that's our last belt off. Next up we've got our water pump, which is this here. And we'll just leave the whole assembly together because it's all going back on. I don't really need to separate this unless the water pump itself is garbage. And again, a little tap tap. She is a little bit corroded. This car just had water in it when I bought it, so that's what all this will be. So we've got 3 bolts holding in this thermostat housing, so we're going to undo that now.
Nice.
So now we're going to pull this coolant housing off of the head, and it's attached to the timing cover as well. So you got bolts going in this way and then 90 degrees opposing. And the same as always, little tap. So now what I'm going to go through is the injector lines. So we're going to go across, undo them all at the top, and then we'll go down to the bottom at the back of the pump and undo them there. And we'll just peel them all off just so we can get a bit more room to work along this side. So I'm going to try and do it from this side of the engine so that you guys can see what I'm doing. This is a 17mm spanner. It's one of these flare nut spanners, really good for injector lines and brake lines. I wouldn't recommend using a normal spanner. They just don't have the same surface area that you'll get with these spanners. So that's all 6 of our injectors off the back of the pump and all 6 of our injector lines off the injectors. So you can see we've got, you know, a nice bit of room here to work. I might move on to our oil cooler. So now we're going to remove our filters so then we can remove our oil cooler. So these are 12 mils. Oh, that's loose. Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff going on this engine like that. It's barely in there at all. Give our little oil dipstick a wiggle. Pull him out of our way. Look at that sealant on there. Yuck. Now we should be able to pull off our cooler. Yuck. Look at the sealant. Use a gasket, you freak. You're gonna go and spend money, buy a TD42 Patrol, get the big engine in it, and then you're not gonna put coolant in it? What a muppet. So we're moving on to our glow plug buzz bar. So these are a 7mm, I think, or a 6.5, something very small. Peel up our buzz bar. So I've decided that I do want to remove my fuel injectors. So I will be doing that. They're a 19mm to undo this little nut that retains the fuel line. Or the spill line, I think this one is. This is the return line, I'm pretty sure. It goes back to the pump. Any unused fuel goes back to the pump and is either recirculated or sent back to the tank. These are tight. I need to clean this old gasket off, so you get yourself a little scraper and just work your way around. Try and get this old gasket off, get any gasket goo out of there. So I want to pull out these studs because I had a weird mixture of studs and bolts, so I think I'll just buy a whole set and replace all of them. So this is a trick I learnt for getting studs out of the head. You get 2 nuts, put them back to back on the thread, and then lock them tight, and then get your spanner on the back one and you push him into the front and they lock together, and you basically wind out the thread instead of winding the nut off, and you undo them and you do it again on the other ones. Now up to dropping the compressor. So there's 1 bolt here. There should be 1 bolt at the back, but mine's missing. And there's 2 on the bottom, and that removes the whole bracket. So now onto the pump cover. So this here is our fuel pump gear. This is what you'd remove if you were changing the pump or just doing your seals in it. You basically undo this and then the pump comes out the rear. Now this is very clever of Nissan. You actually use the cover for the fuel pump, the bolts that retain the cover. You can use those bolts to press the gear off, which is just lovely. Thanks, Nissan. And that is our pump gear removed. The teeth on it look really good. Doesn't look like there's any damage in that, which is awesome. Might need to undo our vac pump, I'd say. And on the back of the vac pump we have this little banjo fitting that's stopping me from getting it out. So probably should have undone him first, but that's why you guys are watching these videos, so you can learn from my mistakes. If anyone drops an engine off their stand, you're a big dummy, especially if you watch this video first. Now we've got the vacuum pump out the way, we can get up underneath this fuel pump to take him off as well. So my tip for when you're removing something that you want to be very careful with, and you know it's going to fall off when you undo it, is get all the difficult to reach bolts off first and leave the easiest bolt to access last, because that means that you can get one hand onto whatever part you're removing and then use your other hand to undo the bolt, rather than, you know, having to reach all the way in, under or behind to get to that difficult to reach bolt. You can just do easy as this. Alright guys, so we're pulling the injectors and glow plugs. Alright guys, so we want to undo our harmonic balancer so that we can get to the water cover or the timing cover, and then get all the way back to our front main seal. So that involves pulling off this bloody big nut, which is a 55mm on the factory turbo motors. So that tells me that this is a factory turbo, which is good news, but it means that you need some bloody big tools. So I've got a 3/4 rattle gun, 55mm socket. Obviously that's not very common in your average DIY tool set, so hopefully this will come undone. It's a big rattle gun and a small compressor, so it just like dumps all the air and then boots back up. Alright guys, so we've got our nut off. Now these have, it's like a taper cone, and what that does is basically seals the balancer to the shaft, and as you do the nut up, it pushes that taper in and locks it. Makes it kind of difficult to pull these balancers off. So what we want to do is put this nut back on. So now that we've got our nut wound off just a couple of threads, it's got a good purchase on there still, belt it with a hammer, and this will shock that taper cone loose. Alrighty guys, so we're going to work our way around this front timing cover. These all look to be 12mm bolts, and there's one nut in this water pump. So usually what you would do is work from the head down, but because I need to get this crank out and get it sent off to the shop, we're going to pull the crank first, and then go back up to the head, lift that off, and then pull our pistons through the top. So we've got the crank out and wrapped up on the floor there, and now I'm just going to put her back up on the stand and roll it over so that we can get ready to work on it tomorrow, take the head off. Alrighty guys, so we are just about fully stripped with our block. There's just a few more little things that we need to get rid of before we throw this into the hot tank. So I'm going to pull out all of our lifters, put those to the side. I want to get this front cover off, and we're going to pull out our cam and oil pump while we're at it. Alright guys, so we got our cam out. It's quite difficult to get it out as gently as possible because it's got a lot of tail end weight towards the back, so you're sort of levering on it, it feels really bad, but it's probably not going to break it. Alright, so these bolts that hold the front plate on, they're a 12mm. The bolt that retained the cam gear was a 17, and the two bolts that actually retained the camshaft itself, they were only 10mm, and then I think these bolts here were 14mm on the idler. There's our oil pump. Alrighty guys, so I'll end the episode here. So we've gone through a full teardown of the TD. I'm going to throw it into the hot tank now, and you guys will see me next episode when we pull it out of the hot tank, and hopefully it looks a lot cleaner than it does now. Next episode we'll get into the machining side of things to prepare for our rebuild. So hopefully next episode will be machining and rebuild all in one. I've got lots and lots of shiny bits that I've been buying on the side that I'm keen to show you guys. So hopefully I'll see you fellas in the next one.